Good afternoon, my little sinners and saints. How's everybody today? Hopefully doing well. I was going to show you my fingernails. Let me go back. Okay, today we got a case on Cameron Hooker. Hooker. So let's jump right into it. There's my little avatar. This case reminds me of the toy box killer case. And of course, the internet always plays with something. There's another picture over here of that Kohlberger guy, but I'm not worried about it. 1976, there was a serial killer on the loose. Maria Elizabeth Spanka, she went by Mary Liz, lived in Cleveland, Ohio. Let's get the warnings out of the way. This is her. She wanted to be a movie star. She's 18 years old. She worked at the camera store. That's where she met John Beatty, which would become her boyfriend. He was their supervisor, and then they got married. He was originally from Chico State, baby, Chico, California, and moved to um, Cleveland, Ohio. So once they got married, she thought it'd be a good idea if they moved back. He wanted to move back to his hometown as well. And on January 34th, 1976, they went to a flea market. They had an argument there. I don't know, maybe he wanted to buy Nick and she wanted to buy Knack. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, she told him that she's leaving, and John got in his car and drove off to the apartment. Now, in real life, or if nowadays that happens, you better not be at that apartment when I get home. Um, one day went by and he didn't seem to, I ain't going to say he didn't seem worried, but he didn't call the police. He didn't call anybody. He just let it go by. And at the end of the day on day two, he started getting nervous. So he called her family to see if she'd come back home, but all of her stuff was still at the apartment. They hadn't seen her in Ohio. So she hadn't went back home. And at the end of day three, John starts to think something's really wrong. So he calls the police, files a report, and guess who's suspect number one? John. But he had zero involvement and he was cleared by the police. So then they declare Mary Liz as a missing person. They have zero leads of where she is or where she could have went to. She never showed up in Ohio either, like I said. She just vanished. So this became a cold case. And a year later goes by, and on May 20th, 1977, Colleen Stan was on the side of the road trying to catch a ride to Westwood, California. The 20-year-old grew up in Riverside, California, and she was trying to get to her best friend's birthday party, and the best friend didn't know she was coming. And so that morning, she had stepped out of her house, and her car wouldn't start, so she thought she would hitchhike. And so she got some rides with long haul truckers to Red Bluff, California. And then she had to get out because that's as far as they were going. And so she started to hitchhike again. And a car pulls over with a couple and a baby in it. I mean, a couple alone makes you feel more comfortable, but a couple with a baby in the car, you're going to trust that. Back then, this is the 70s. People hitchhike, so don't come after me for saying people shouldn't get in cars with other people. Um, but the couple says, Colleen, believe it or not, we're going to Westwood too. How ironic. So she gets in the car and they start down the road. They stop for gas, and the woman and the baby goes into the filling station. That's what us old timers call it, filling station. But goes into the gas station, and the man gets out and pumps gas, and Colleen goes into the bathroom to freshen up. She said that she had this overwhelming feeling to get the hell out of there. But she ignored the voice, and she gets in the back seat. And this time is when she notices that there's a weird box there. It wasn't there before. Um, she looked at the box, and it was made of wood. It had a hole on one side and two latches on each side. Like a hole in the front and then two latches, one on each side. The couple tells her that they're going to make a quick pit stop at the ice caves. They want to see it. So they pull off the road, and there's this little creek. So the woman and the baby go down to the creek, and Colleen starts thinking, where did the man go? And that's when he jumps into the back seat and puts a knife to her face. He ties her up. He grabs the box and he puts it on Colleen's head. The box was lined with soundproof material, so when she screamed, no one could hear it. She thought when the woman and the baby come back to the car, they'll stop this. She'll get involved. But no, the woman and the baby come back to the car and they began on their way. They took her to their home. And when they arrived, the woman and the baby went into the house, and the man grabs Colleen and takes her into the basement. He removes the head box and blindfolds her, locking her arms into two straps that are hanging from the rafters and two straps to her ankles. And she's in an X shape, an X, um, and her body's not touching the ground. So this is very painful to her. And there's no support under her feet, like I said. So like she was in pain. Colleen would later say that she was this was extremely painful. The blindfold come up a little bit, and she looked over to the wall, and she saw a magazine, like a page out of a magazine or something, and there was a woman in the same position, so she flipped out. Colleen is screaming and hollering, and the man tries to calm her down. And by doing this, he thought the way that he should calm her down is by whipping her. Um, she could also see under the blindfold again at another point, and she sees the couple having sex at her feet. He puts the head box back on her and takes her down, and then puts her into another box that he had ready for use, called a body box. He chained her arms and her ankles to the box. Spent the night, she did, in the box. The next day, the man comes down and he puts on another contraption. And this is where I say it gives me the toy box vibes. And he called it the rake. Couldn't figure out what the definition of that was. I looked and looked, and only thing that come up was a yard rake. But he handcuffed her to the rake, and her head was still in the head box. So he leaves her there for another full day. He brings her food. She won't eat it, so he gets pissed off. So he punishes her again. He chains her back up to the ceiling and whips her, and then puts her back in the rake. Um, he put her back in the rake for 10 days straight, and he leaves her there. Then back to the body box, and only allowed to get out each day for about 20 minutes to eat or use the bathroom. That's what the head box looked like. You can see the stuff inside to keep her quiet. And that was the house that they took them to. That was the actual house. He would come in and constrict her breathing. He would shock her, whipping her, and he would do all kinds of horrible things to her, trying to keep her under control and make her submit. Um, He submerged her underwater until she almost drowned, burning her in her pubic area with a heat lamp. He struck, he stuck to his routine for about 5 or 6 months of keeping her in the box for 10 days at a time. 9,200 was tortured in this time. 9,200 hours is what the time length of her being tortured was. Then he makes this triangle box, as you see in the picture. I don't know how she wore that. There's no pictures of her wearing. I mean, obviously, no pictures of her wearing it. But it's made and it's made to fit under the stairs. This is the box that she would live in. Around the same time, Colleen gets her first like clue of where she was. She saw a belt and she saw the man's name on it. The belt said Cameron, and this gave her an idea of who had her and possibly if she could escape, at least a name some of the cops could go off of. At this point, Colleen is given a slave contract, quotation marks, slave contract, and he tells her that the company is an underground sex company and they're everywhere and they're always watching. He bought and sold women in slavery, and if she ever tried to escape, she'd be caught and tortured and killed. He had granted her own, he was granted his own slave, and Colleen was it. And just for the record, he is up, we'll get to it later, he is up for parole. This, I think, last year's when it was. But Cameron said his wife used to be a slave and left, and that's why her legs are so bad, is because the company broke them and tried to make it to where she could never use them again. On the contract, Cameron was enlisted as Michael Powers and his wife listed as Janice Powers. So this gives her more names. They work at a lumber mill for a while, she said, and this is where he meets Janice, a 15-year-old Janice at the time. Colleen is given a new name by Cameron. He calls her Kay. That was ingenious. I would have never thought of that. She is allowed to move from time to time out of the box. And when she is left out of the box, she is allowed to be out. She can go upstairs and she can do housework. Only allowed to call Cameron Master and Sir and Janice Ma'am. She is labeled, has to kneel and bow her head whenever she asks for anything. Um, Up until this point, Cameron had not raped her, but this is one of Janice's rules that he wasn't allowed to, but that changes. Cameron talked Janice into letting him have sex with Colleen. April 1978, 11 months of missing. She's 21 years old. Cameron and Janice decide to downsize and move into a mobile home. I don't know why they did that. They build another box coffin size. This one will be put under the bed. 23 hours a day. Let me jump back to having sex. It may go into it again later on, but he used God and the Bible to try to talk Janice into having sex with Colleen. But for 23 hours a day, Colleen was kept in this box. That's Janice and Cameron. And the box was stored up under the bed. Janice finds out that she's pregnant with another baby in 1978 and gives birth in the bed while Colleen is under it. They were letting Colleen out of the box more and more and watched her to make sure she wasn't trying to escape. And Janice would let her out while Cameron was at work. Three years later, now allowed to sleep chained to the toilet in the home. She had very few restrictions placed on her. Cameron was raping her at the time. Colleen kept it a secret from Janice because still he hadn't talked her into it yet. She was allowed to go jogging, and people were like, why didn't she leave? Why wouldn't she leave? She had opportunities to leave. And the Stockholm syndrome is very powerful. And like I said, this was 3 years later, and I think that the Stockholm syndrome was a factor here. In 1980, Cameron allowed her to call and go visit her family. In 1981, um, he had let her call her family more and speak with them, but she would always say that she didn't want to come back home. Um, Said that he had bought her for $30,000 and bought a gun and told her to put it in her mouth and pull the trigger to show her loyalty to him. And now this is in Sacramento County, where the company was. To see her parents, she had to take a lie detector test. So the lie detector test was in Sacramento. They went to the building, and Cameron comes back out. Sorry, Cameron comes back out, and he says, "You know what? You've been such a good slave that the company said that they waived the lie detector test, and you don't have to take it. That you can go see your family." And he actually left her there with her family for a little while and then come back and picked her up. There's actually a picture. This was taken by the family, her actual family. Um, Said that she was a good slave. Felt like Colleen got too comfortable with the family, so he punished her for that with her own family. She was too comfortable, so he punished her for that. He puts her back in the box full time from 1981 to 1984. She was in the box. He put a photo in the box of a pretty lady. Janice learns of him raping her. Cameron preached to Janice about the Bible and how it talked about justification for his actions. In 1984, Colleen gets more freedom again, allowed to even get a job. She could keep $20 a week or a month for her pay out of all her pay. Of course, Cameron wants a threesome. Um, Sorry about all the ums. And still, Cameron is trying to preach to her about how Abraham, Sarah, and the handmaid to get her justification, his justification for sleeping with Colleen. Janice told the pastor, and the pastor told her to leave and to tell the police. The pastor did nothing. Janice told Colleen, there's no company. The next day, whenever Cameron went to work, Janice and Colleen went to Janice's parents' house with the kids. Colleen called her parents for money to come home um, and called Cameron and told him that she was leaving. After only 1 week, though, Janice comes back to Cameron and stays for a month and a half, and then she leaves again. And now this is 7.5 years into all this. Janice asked Colleen not to turn him in on November 4th, 1984. Didn't destroy or torture the device. Don't know why he didn't after all this. Uh, Janice told a friend, and she was ready to go to the police. Janice wanted the immunity to get to give all the full details of their involvement or her involvement in the crimes and stuff that went on. She did get full immunity, and so she told the police what happened. And she also mentions that a year before Colleen, there was this girl named Mary Liz. and they had offered her a ride, and she wouldn't stop screaming. So to keep her from screaming so much, Cameron had killed her. He had wrapped cords around her neck and then stabbed her to death, and they buried her in a shallow grave near a state park. Whenever they went there, the body was not found, but Cameron has photos of her, and 2.5 days of deliberations, they found him guilty and on all charges, and he got 104 years in prison. He was never charged with Mary Liz murder because it remains unsolved, and he still denies it. And to this day, uh, they couldn't find her body, is why he was never charged. And we was talking about he was up for parole. They denied his parole until 2030. So he still has a chance of getting out in 2030, this sadistic man. This is some of the pictures of the women. This was a newspaper clipping. And that is it. I hope you enjoyed this. I know it's kind of short. Uh, I thought it was a very interesting case. It reminded me of the Toy Box Killer. There's a lot of wackos out there. Don't take bribes from people. This is not the 70s. So I will see you later. Bye.